Okay, that's fine. I need one that I can whack people with. Welcome. What?
And after Dachau, we get a picture of last photo on this camera. It's like here, and then
Well,
awful place.
welcome to our talk this evening. I'm happy to introduce Roger Dingledine, President and lead developer designer of Tor, and Jacob Appelbaum, a recent immigrant to Germany, who is also the, I think, lead advocate is, I think, a good title for Tor. And they are going to talk tonight to us about censorship resistance and surveillance. Enjoy.
Does this thing work yet?
Yeah, does this one? All right, hi. It's really fantastic to be here again, and I'm really happy that Roger and so many other Tor people can join me this time. So we came prepared, but we wanted to say that there have been some things that have happened in the world since, well, we originally talked with Christian about giving this talk, and we thought maybe we could do one of two talks. We can read some slides to you, or we can play a choose-your-own-adventure game. So there exists some possibility here for an interactive talk, a more interactive talk. And so we can also make this decision by just doing a little survey. So how many people here are familiar with Tor technically, or at least at a high level of some kind, so that they understand it's more than just a bad name in German for something related to anonymity? Okay, we can skip the introduction to Tor. Alles klar. So, what do you think?
Okay, so hi everybody. We could directly go into questions. We could jump into recent events. There are a lot of ways we can take this. We'd like to make this as interactive as we can because we're here to help you answer whatever questions you have about Tor or anonymity or privacy or security or what's going on in the world. So there are a lot of variations on how we can do this. So if you would like to do that, raise your hand now and start yelling out your questions. If that doesn't happen, we'll figure out a different plan.
Okay, so I think just to be culturally sensitive, you right there in the pink shirt, do you have any questions? Or think that people near you might have a question? Since traditionally it's hard to get people to raise their hand. No? You do, fantastic, I knew that would work.
A bit of an introduction to
Sorry.
take on the current situation.
That was minute 3. All right.
You'll notice that each of us will have different answers to every question probably, so we'll see how that one goes.
Okay, and you? I didn't even know that rumor had been started. Yeah, we can pass this microphone maybe. So the question that the fine gentleman asked is there truth to the rumor that I am seeking political asylum in Germany? And I didn't know that that rumor existed. I prefer marriage generally, but just kidding. But that said, I don't think so. I mean, I hope that that is not a necessity. I'd like to think that our country, where I currently have a house, is still free. But that said, I do now live in Berlin and applied for a residency visa because I don't feel safe to return to the United States because the rule of law, as I understand it, does not really seem to exist in the ways that I would like. And part of the revelations that we have seen, you know, they speak volumes about that, right? Secret law, secret courts, secret interpretations. To call that democracy is, I think, horse shit, right? And when those things are used with drone strikes and aggressive wars of imperialism, well, I mean, that doesn't make me feel great being outside of America, actually. But that rumor, otherwise I had not heard it, so thanks for starting it. Pass the microphone to that guy.
It's a little bit tricky to look at this just as the U.S. is bad and other countries are not so bad or are great. A long time ago, Andreas Fitzman, how many people here know the name Andreas Fitzman, Dresden computer science professor? So long ago, we were thinking about the Privacy Enhancing Technologies Symposium, which is where all of the academics who do great research on anonymity technologies go. And for, I think the first 2 years, it was in the U.S., and after that, it was in Dresden. And after that, we basically boycotted the U.S. because of their bad privacy approaches and their bad visa approaches and the fingerprinting and all of that. And we said, we're not going to force people, even technologists and academics, who are going to a country like the U.S. to deal with that. And 2 or 3 years ago, we decided to stop boycotting the U.S. because the rest of the countries had caught up. It's now just as bad to go to various places in Europe as it is to go to the U.S. with respect to all the various people who want to go there. So yes, there are a lot of bad things going on in the U.S. Don't think moving to Germany is going to solve it all.
Okay, that basically covered my question.
I can follow up a little bit with this, which is to say, you know, if we look at the U.S. and we try to demonize it, this is a really, it's a far too simplistic situation. And I'm actually pretty proud of being born in America, and you know, I'm from the Bear Republic of California, and one of my childhood friends is actually in the audience here, and to say that, you know, to just basically bash on America is to get the wrong message across, and that's not the case. And I think it's really important to set the record straight about that, in that the issue is not the American people or the country, it is that there are certain lawless elements in government that exist in the United States who, in the cloak of secrecy, have done things which 10 years ago we were ridiculed for talking about building protections against. And 5 years ago, when those things were used for certain ends, people still thought it was pretty crazy. And when I gave a talk at the 29C3 last December in Hamburg, and I said that the head of the NSA was lying, and I said that they were wiretapping Americans and they were wiretapping the rest of the world, people still at that point denied that this was possible. They still suggested that this was tinfoil hattery and so on. And this is both to deny the facts that have been laid before the European Union, such as Duncan Campbell's interception report to the European Union of 2001, I think. And it's also to deny a lot of the things that we see, the fruits of these surveillance programs sort of coming to bear, right? Like the notion of a signature strike. Right? What is a signature strike? It is metadata that is often gleaned from surveillance that is used for political assassination, right? Without a judge, without a jury, and so on. And so just 7 months ago, people really were, I think, still in denial. And so the big thing that has happened is not that we have learned that America is the devil or something like this, but actually a few people in the United States have taken a Faustian pact, betrayed the democracy that does exist to some degree in the United States still, and under that cloak of secrecy, they have done things which are highly illegal, and they have encouraged similar people in similar positions in the German government, for example, as we know from last week's Der Spiegel article, to do the same thing. That doesn't mean that you guys are bad, except for the BND guys in the audience. But probably not even individually. But the point is that these systems that exist, those systems have some people. Most of those people are actually quite good people. And America as a country itself, I don't think of it as a bad place. But I also don't think of it as a safe place for myself, my friends, and people that I really care about in certain contexts. And the German word that explains it the best for me is Zersetzung, which I'm sure I just pronounced incorrectly. But those of you that are Ostis probably realize what this word is, and you know it quite well. And that is a current state of affairs in the United States for some political activists or people who don't consider themselves to be political activists but are targeted as terrorists because of the things that they say, that they think, that they believe, that they do with their computers. And so that's very complicated, and we should not just blanket dismiss the complication and sum it up as America is a bad place, because I feel like Roger and I give America a good name.
This is a really interesting conversation to be having here. So Jake mentioned 10 years ago this, 5 years ago that. So 4 years ago, I was at a Dutch hacker conference. I think it was HAR, Hacking at Random. And I was on a panel where we were talking about freedom and freedom from surveillance and censorship and so on. And one of the points that I found really hard to drive home to the audience, everybody was saying, Iran is bad because they censor and they surveil. Syria is bad because they censor and surveil. I'm so glad I live in a good country. I'm so glad I live in the West where we don't do that. And part of the hardest message to give them there was, actually, you can't divide things into those countries that censor and surveil and those Western countries that are free and provide freedom. You can't sit back and say, good thing I'm in Germany where they wouldn't do that to me. You have to start fighting for freedom all around the world. You can't divide it into, I'm glad I don't live in over-theristan, good thing I'm free here. And here we are now trying to draw the lines between certain Western countries. You can't, there's no bucket A free, bucket B non-free. We need all around the world to have these technologies and policies and cultural approaches that can maintain freedom everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, having just come from Dachau about 20 minutes ago, I feel like there should be pretty much no nationalist, exceptionalist sentiment anywhere in the world, because the lesson here is that humans exist, and given the right context, the right tools, the right political motivations, pretty much anything is possible. And we shouldn't forget, however, that people are the change for that possibility, but it can be a positive change, a negative change, and that, I think, with things like the Tor network, can be a positive change. And what we are trying to do at the Tor project, but in general, I think as human beings, I mean, I don't speak for Roger, but I guess I'll try, by saying, we are trying to build alternative systems that increase human autonomy and liberty and agency. And part of this is technology. The Tor network is obviously technology, and the people in this room that run Tor relays, they are obviously technologically inclined. But the idea of anonymity, the idea of privacy, of dignity, and of agency, these things exist without computers and without the internet. They really can, if we want them to. Right? When we have the Briefsgeheims, for example, this is not about capabilities. It's about fundamental, rights in the Grundgesetz. This is not about what is possible. It's about what we as a society or societies around the world want to build. So what Tor is trying, I think, and successfully doing in some cases, is building alternatives that give people agency to change the world they live in and to take back some of the things that they have lost with the way that the networks have been architected and the way that the world has been building itself out. And we see this all over the place. So these slides in this deck, we have examples of where a country has blocked the Tor network, and we see this, and people say, oh, you're at war with China. But that's ridiculous. What we're trying to do is help people to have a nonviolent alternative where they can seek to use free speech and the ability to read and to communicate with each other, not just for conflict resolution, but for simply being able to freely express oneself and to see the expression of others. And we have no battle with governments. Instead, what it is often those governments have battles with their own citizens. And sometimes our tool is a casualty of that, actually. And this tells you something about how those governments view the properties that the tool can enable in those societies. So this is inherently, in a sense, a political thing, but it depends on from which position of privilege you come from, because in the American tradition, anonymity as a right is a fundamental thing that comes from the core revolutionary goals of the American Revolution against the tyrannical British. Right? There's a reason we shot them. It still exists today. Now it's called tempora. But, right? And the thing is that in Burma, it's a little different. When I was in Burma, basically 8 months ago, 9 months ago, or something like that, anonymity as a right is well, let's just say it's not a given. But in some cases, people that are living there, they understand it as a necessity so that they may continue to survive. But that isn't to say that we are conflicting with the Burmese government. I mean, in a sense, I do personally, but I think that it's individuals who are choosing this. And so if we just talk about technology, we really miss a really an absolutely critical part. And it was Roger actually that convinced me of this when he said that we aren't at war with China. Instead, what it is that we're helping people to do things, and sometimes those people, in solidarity with the Tor network, have trouble. They have trouble because their government does not want them to speak freely, does not want them to have privacy, does not want them to have the dignity that this can provide to them on the internet when they wish to have an alternative.
And it can't be about us trying to find out how China should change or how some other country should change. I don't know how China should be. There are a lot of people in China who have strong opinions about how their country should change, and we should give them privacy, protection, freedom, knowledge, whatever you want to call it. We should give them the ability to be able to change their country in the way that they want to change it, but that's up to them, whether they do that this year or next year or who chooses to do it. One of the other challenges that we have, when I was first starting out looking at privacy-enhancing technologies. I was about to say the phrase freedom technologies. Maybe they're synonyms, who knows? When I was first looking at anonymity tools, I was thinking to myself, there are a lot of people out there who really want these things, and they're going to risk their lives communicating, whatever, learning, publishing, reading. Is that on me? Should I, what sort of risks should I worry about for when they're going to use tools like this? And the answer is, now that we've actually done a lot of trainings and met with a lot of people around the world, they are going to do it anyway. They're going to go out into the streets and start yelling. They're going to connect directly to Facebook. They're going to change their world because that's more important to them than whether they're going to end up dead the next week. So from that perspective, what I as a technologist need to do is give them the best tools I can, even though they're not perfect, to help them be safer with what they're going to do anyway.
And fundamentally, you could also talk about this like the safe sex community does. This is a harm reduction strategy, right? So the cypherpunks that work on writing code to make privacy-enhancing technologies possible, those cypherpunks are in some cases working on harm reduction software of a particular kind, or sometimes in a much general, more social sense of that, but it's harm reduction. And there are some basic things that need to be done for these kinds of tools to be worth using or trusting. And I really think it actually extends to the whole of society, but you have to start somewhere, and perfection is, let's say, the enemy of the good enough in some cases. So free software, free and open source software, as the Free Software Foundation talks about it, as Christian Gruthoff, who is here at the university, works on with GNU-net, for example, right? Free software is absolutely essential so that you don't have to trust us. That's really key. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't trust us as people. It just means that it is important that we distribute the trust and we distribute the verification, right? So this is another key point, which is we need help studying. We need people in academia, we need people who are journalists, we need users, we need all sorts of information. And when we have that, it's very helpful. So solidarity and mutual aid. So mutual aid in this, you can help, protect freedom online, as this poster says, by running a Tor relay. I mean, it's a cute poster, which I appreciate the person that made it, but realistically, if every single one of you went home today and ran a Tor relay, the Tor network would be one quarter larger of its current size. So when we talk about individuals making an impact in the world, literally, if every person went home and did that, it would really help people, and it does help people. And if half of you are able to understand these technologies and you help with that, that's also huge. Sometimes a little overloading, but we think that these things are very important, and at its core, this helps to build alternatives, I think. And really working in solidarity with projects like GNU-net and the other things that Christian students are doing here, that's very, very important. And so if you're working on projects which you feel fit into this general idea that we're talking about right now, we really want you to come work with us. And in some cases, we may even be able to find funding to help you to sustain yourself while you work on things, instead of going and working at a big shitty corporation like Facebook, StasiBook. And if you'd be blown away by this idea that you could make a living writing free software, we wanted to come here to tell you that this is a possibility. And there are dozens of people in this room that do. And that really increases the autonomy of all humans in the world, as everyone has access and everyone can use that.
Speaking of trusting us, let me twist this from a more political, spiritual discussion to a more technical. Let me give you a concrete example. So right now, you want to download the Tor software. You go to www.torproject.org. Your browser, if you're lucky, redirects you to the HTTPS version. Maybe you can get that. That's great. There are a lot of places in the world where that website is blocked, so they get it somehow. They get it from a friend. They get it from a Tor mirror or something like that. How do they know that the thing they're getting is actually the software that we wrote? How many people here have heard of PGP or GPG or something like that? Excellent. Okay. How many people here use Windows?
We're in Germany.
Most of our users do. And we have some instructions for how to check the PGP signature on the download. The problem is most of them are on Windows, and the instructions start with download gpg.exe from this HTTP website. I have no fix for this. These people are screwed. Maybe they need to go talk to their friends who know how to check these things. Maybe they need to have more software that comes bundled with their operating system. Maybe they need to switch operating systems. But these are among the technical challenges that we wrestle with also. Can't we get an authentic code signature? Can't we say, dear Microsoft, here's our money. Can you give us a key so that you can promise things to people?
Yeah, so, I mean, yes. We absolutely...
Yes.
Yes, we can do that, but what exactly do we do when we do that, right? We could do the same with Apple as well, but if you read the things that they want you to agree to, they want to restrict the freedoms that free software gives you in many cases. And this is a really terrible problem, and it would be fantastic if we had a solution in policy as well as technology to solve this. Another thing we could do, for example, is find a grad student here who's living on ramen, although this is Germany, so probably something much nicer than ramen, and wants to add this to all the major web browsers. So by default, when you download a thing, you can check a peer-to-peer signature system that doesn't require Microsoft to be in the loop, or uses the Bitcoin blockchain, or some really inventive solution that's distributed and actually secure, where if they have a secure browser, or if it came with their computer, they have some hope in that. And so these kinds of problems are all trivially solved by academics, actually. Almost every problem we have has been written up and extensively analyzed, except for the really deep censorship-related things. So if you want to help with that, I think the Authentic Code might be an incremental step, but we'd like a real solution that every software project will benefit from as well, not just Tor.
I have a question on downloading Tor. How big is the chance if I use my PC and, as you described, download the installation files, that at this moment my computer is tracked and as critical from one of these agencies the last, we read a lot about the last weeks. So is it recommended really to use the personal PC to download Tor, or should I buy a prepaid card and use a computer from someone else and so
blame him. I suspect we're going to have at least two answers to this one. Shall I let you
go first?
I go first. Okay. It depends how paranoid you are. There are a lot of different problems that you need to think about and learn about in terms of having your computer be secure. Long ago, we wrote a program called Tor. It was a SOX proxy. You could get it, you could run it, you could configure your browser to point its sessions through that, and all that application level data stuff like cookies and whether you would run Flash and all of that, not our problem, your problem, good luck. And that was probably not a great decision. So, and we were talking to folks in Egypt who were saying, yes, I use Internet Explorer because I've never heard of Firefox, and please can you make an Arabic version because we use the French version now. So we, at that point, built the Tor browser bundle, which comes with a bunch of changes to, basically, at this point, it's a fork of Firefox. And it comes with a bunch of changes to fix pretty serious privacy and security flaws that Mozilla doesn't consider worth fixing.
Which is shameful, by the way, Mozilla.
And there is a lot more to it, and now that they're releasing every 6 weeks, we're having a really tough time keeping up with all the privacy disasters that they put in every 6 weeks.
And they're also really awful to the great Tor hacker, Mike Perry, who is in the audience here, and if you know anybody that works at Mozilla and would like to help with this problem, boy, would you really make him happy, and he really needs help with that in a pretty serious way.
So if you're using the Tor browser bundle now, you've got your own browser, it goes through Tor, it disables plugins, it does a bunch of other stuff to keep you pretty safe. But there you are on Windows, so you go visit something, that something gives you an overflow in Firefox, they take over your computer, oops. Or, so that's, I mean, hopefully as an internet user, you're used to that concept. But there are a couple of other ways that these things can go wrong. One of them is you're on Windows, you go to some website, you use Tor to safely download a Microsoft Word file. So there you have this .doc file in your desktop, is that what they call it? And then you click it, and it loads up. It has an embedded image link with a bunch of backslashes that turns into a NetBIOS call that goes out at the kernel level. The kernel says, oh, a URL, I think I'll fetch it. Where do you set your proxy settings in the Windows kernel? Where do you set your proxy settings in Microsoft Word? Did you know Microsoft Word was a network application? Isn't that Microsoft's slogan a while ago? We can't tell where the desktop ends and the internet begins. So this is a huge problem. And so one answer is you should run all of this stuff in a VM inside Windows. And then at least they'll have to break through that, and maybe they won't be able to break out of the VM, except you're already running Windows, and you already went somewhere with your Internet Explorer 2 years ago, and that place already broke in, and now it has some sort of spyware to catch your bank account number and so on. So there you are running your VM to have Tor inside, but you've got your spyware outside the VM. That's not going to work so well. So we have a live CD called Tails, which is Debian-based, and it has the applications that you should want and none of the applications that you shouldn't want. But you're going to, basically you can boot that, and when you're done, you unplug it and all of your state disappears. So that's probably the better way to do it.
Not all of the state disappears.
All of your state disappears, yeah. So there are a bunch of research projects showing interesting things that don't disappear. There's also the challenge, most people actually like storing stuff once they've visited websites for a while, and they want to keep something. Maybe they're writing a document or whatever.
Oh, you meant that kind of state?
And then there's also the sort of state that he's talking about, which I'll let him elaborate on now.
Yeah, so the answer is yes. I mean, so this is why law and policy matter, right? Basically, if you don't have a constitutional democracy with fundamental human rights, the answer to that question is yes. So right now, I believe the answer to your question is yes. Sorry. I think it's terrible.
But taking somebody else's computer and using that isn't going to be much better. So maybe the answer to that question is no. Maybe you shouldn't do either of those.
Yes and no works for that.
But again, I mean, how much of it has to do with law and policy and so on? I remember long ago I was arguing with legislators in the US, people who are actually making laws, and they were saying, there's this criminal activity. You know what we're going to do to stop it?